Hey guys, Fletch over here, and today's video is going to be a Premier League review show reviewing Game 13 of the 2019-2020 Premier League season. This round of fixtures threw up some big encounters and it produced some big results, and of course a lot of goals and a lot of drama. And once again, our old friend VAR was heavily involved and a key thread in the majority of games that happened this past weekend. So with all that being said, all the goals, all the results, all the talking points are inside this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to begin with arguably the biggest game of this round of fixtures, and of course I am talking about Manchester City versus Chelsea. And it was a game that saw Manchester City come back from behind to get back to winning ways in the Premier League, and in the process end Chelsea's 6-game winning run as Pep Guardiola's side ran out 2-1 winners at the Etihad against Frank Lampard's side. 21 minutes were on the clock when Chelsea made the breakthrough, and N'Golo Kante latched onto Mateo Kovacic's pass, and his shot just had enough on it to beat Ederson in the City goal and of course cross the line to put the Blues in front. Just before the half-hour mark though, City did manage to equalise. Kevin De Bruyne's deflected strike wrong-footed Kepa Arrizabalaga in the Blues goal and found its way into the back of the net. Minutes later, City then went ahead not long after the equaliser. Riyad Mahrez cut in from the right-hand side and produced a fine finish to put City ahead and to of course cap off a very well-taken solo goal in the process. City went on to hold on to their lead and thought they'd finished off their performance by adding a third goal when Raheem Sterling fired home. However, VAR interfered, chalked off the goal after they believed Sterling was in an offside position, something that was quite controversial, but it didn't really cost City anything as they went on to win the game and got back to winning ways in the process. Obviously a great result for City and a poor one for Chelsea, but overall it was a good game for both sides. Both teams created plenty of chances, and on another day it could have been a different outcome. City will feel the happier of the two, of course, to have not only just got back to winning ways but also back in pursuit of Liverpool and Leicester, who are above them in the table, whilst Chelsea can feel proud of the performance, and if a bit of luck had gone their way on another day, who knows how the result would have played out. Just a quick word on the VAR ruling out Sterling's goal. At least VAR is being consistent, having ruled out Roberto Firmino's goal, David McGoldrick's goal and Serge Aurier's goal in the past already this season. It's extremely harsh, I know, and I do think that the ruling needs to be reworded for incidents like these, but at least it's being consistent at the end of the day. Both sides have Champions League action to look forward to this week before City take on Newcastle in Saturday's lunchtime game, whilst the Blues face a London derby in the form of West Ham at Stamford Bridge on the same day. Our next game saw Liverpool manage to maintain their unbeaten season with a 2-1 victory over Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. Palace thought they had taken the lead close to half-time when James Tompkins headed home from a Palace free kick. However, VAR interfered to rule out the goal after Jordan Ayew was judged to have pushed Dejan Lovren as the free kick was played into the box. And then minutes after the restart, Liverpool capitalised and broke the deadlock themselves when Sadio Mane scored, despite it not being the cleanest strike in the world, but it still had enough on it to hit the post and trickle over the goal line. Palace did manage to equalise later on in that half when Wilfried Zaha fired home from inside the penalty area, but they weren't on level terms for very long as minutes later a bit of pinball in the penalty area of Palace occurred from a Liverpool corner, and eventually the ball broke to Roberto Firmino, who struck home to seal the win for the Reds and maintain their 8-point lead at the top of the table. Not for the first time this season, a below par performance from Liverpool, but they managed to get the job done. Selhurst Park, despite Liverpool picking up a few decent results over the years there, has always been a strange ground for the Reds to go, in which the Reds very rarely perform well, but they managed to somehow get the win in that game. Yes, the VAR interference for the Palace goal in the first half was a little fortunate. On another day, it could have easily countered, but even Roy Hodgson himself, the Palace manager, came out and said that VAR made the right call in that instance. As for Palace themselves, a good performance that they can take many positives away from, but they'll feel slightly annoyed not to have come out of the game with anything. The Reds have Champions League commitments this week against Napoli before hosting Brighton on Saturday, whilst Palace travel to Burnley on the same day. Our next game of focus brings us to the return of Jose Mourinho and his return to the Premier League, and it was an initial success for the Portuguese manager, as on his debut as Tottenham manager, it ended with a 3-2 victory for him and Tottenham over fellow rivals West Ham at the London Stadium. Spurs had the ball in the back of the net very early on through Harry Kane, but the England striker was correctly given offside. Later on in the first half, Spurs did eventually manage to go in front through Heung-min Son. After being slipped through by Dele Alli, his left foot strike found the back of the net. Ali was again involved in Tottenham's second goal with a nice piece of skill to set Son away, and the winger this time turned from goalscorer to provider as he squared the ball across goal for Lucas Moura to score and double Tottenham's lead. 5 minutes after the interval, Tottenham scored their third goal of the afternoon, and this time there was no stopping Kane as he headed home Serge Aurier's cross. Then West Ham sparked a bit of a comeback. First, substitute Mikel Antonio fired home before an injury time goal from Angelo Ogbonna reduced the deficit to 1 goal. However, the comeback proved to be too little too late. It couldn't be completed as Spurs held on for the 3 points. A decent return to management for Jose Mourinho. For 60 minutes or so, Tottenham were in control and West Ham barely laid a glove on them, and then a lack of composure and concentration allowed the Hammers back into the game, something that will surely anger Mourinho, but ultimately getting that first win under his belt would have been the bigger goal here, and that is exactly what he and the team managed to achieve. As for West Ham, despite scoring 2 goals, it wasn't a great performance. It now means they've not won in their last 7 league games, and the only shining light for them on an otherwise dark afternoon was the performance of Mikel Antonio, as Manuel Pellegrini's job security comes under even more threat. Mourinho will take charge of his first Champions League game with Spurs this week before they clash with Bournemouth on Saturday, whilst West Ham face another tough task when they face another London team in Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Our next game comes from the seaside as the Amex Stadium played host to Leicester's 2-0 victory over Brighton in one of the multiple 3 o'clock games to take place on Saturday. It took them until just after the hour mark to break the deadlock, but eventually the Foxes made the breakthrough when a counter-attack spearheaded by Jamie Vardy finished with the England striker squaring the ball to Ayoze Perez to tap home. Later on in the half, Leicester were awarded a penalty for a push on Demarai Gray. Jamie Vardy stepped up, but Matt Ryan made a save. However, the rebound sat up for James Maddison to head home, but VAR interfered and saw that both teams had a player guilty of encroachment, and therefore the spot kick was to be retaken. Vardy again stepped up and this time made no mistake in scoring himself as the Foxes made it 5 wins on the bounce. Poor result for Brighton this one, and looking ahead to December, they've got some very tough fixtures on the horizon, so it could be a long month ahead for the Seagulls, beginning with Liverpool away on Saturday. As for Leicester, a solid win, another clean sheet, their 4th league clean sheet in a row, it has to be pointed out, and honestly, this Leicester team are looking very, very good right now with some favourable and interesting fixtures coming up, which could mean that Leicester could be still flying high for some weeks to come at least. The Foxes will look to make it 6 wins on the bounce when they take on an under pressure Marco Silva and his Everton side next Sunday. Next game on this list saw goals from João Moutinho and Raul Jimenez push Wolves up to 5th in the table following their 2-1 victory over 10-man Bournemouth at the Vitality Stadium. The away side took the lead midway through the first half when João Moutinho curled a stunning free kick into the top corner, and 10 minutes later Wolves doubled their lead. Moutinho again involved as he slipped through Adama Traore down the right hand side, and the wingers cut back set up Raul Jimenez for a smart finish. Things went from bad to worse for Bournemouth minutes later when Simon Francis was sent off for a second bookable offence following his foul on Diego Jota, but despite being down to 10 men, the Cherries did manage to halve the deficit on the hour mark when Steve Cook headed home a Bournemouth corner to set up an interesting final half hour. But the comeback was never completed. Wolves stood firm and saw the game out to take all 3 points. Another poor result for Bournemouth as their inconsistency rolls on. They were undone by 2 set pieces, one that was a stunning goal and the other which they fell asleep for. I honestly believe that defensively they need to strengthen up in key areas. As for Wolves though, they're up to 5th now, which is great considering the poor start to the season that they endured. Really are showing signs of the team that they were during their last campaign, and not only that, but this now makes it 8 consecutive games unbeaten in the league for the Wanderers here. A very good record to have in a season full of inconsistent teams. The Cherries will travel to London to face Jose Mourinho's Tottenham on Saturday, whilst Wolves have Europa League commitments this week before hosting Sheffield United on Sunday. Next on this list proved to be quite the crazy fixture as it played out at Bramall Lane, as Sheffield United and Manchester United played out a 3-3 draw on Sunday afternoon. The Blades broke the deadlock inside 20 minutes when John Fletch bundled the ball home after David De Gea's save from John Lundstrom's shot fell right into his path. The newly promoted side doubled their lead in the second half when Lise Mousset fired home beyond David De Gea from outside the penalty area. But then within 10 minutes, United put on a crazy comeback. The comeback was initially sparked by young left-back Brendan Williams, whose strike found the back of the net after Dan James's deflected cross found him in the penalty area. Minutes later, United equalised when Marcus Rashford's cross was met by substitute Mason Greenwood, who turned home. And then minutes later, again, United went in front. James again involved as he teed up Rashford, who fired home, but the drama still wasn't done yet, as in the dying moments of the game, Ollie McBurney managed to equalise for the Blades after his shot was too hot for David De Gea to handle, and after surviving a VAR check for a potential handball, it was left to stand and both sides were forced to settle for a point apiece. Quite the crazy game here. I believe that United were poor for about 70 odd of the 90 minutes, and during the 10-20 minute period that they actually sparked into life, they completed, to be fair, a very good comeback where they were ruthless and clinical, but ultimately they couldn't see the game out. And I honestly believe that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's team selection and substitutions may come into question for this result, especially the choices of, for example, starting Phil Jones and playing 5 at the back. As for Sheffield United, a loss of concentration allowed United back into the game. They looked tired in key areas during that period, but fair play and full credit for playing very well for the majority of the game, as well as for coming back to equalise at the death. Not many teams would have been able to have done that, especially considering the way the second half went. The Blades travel to Wolves next Sunday for their next game, whilst United host Aston Villa on the same day. Our next game saw Watford reacquaint themselves with the bottom of the table this week following their 3-0 defeat to Burnley at Vicarage Road in our next game of focus. Despite having the better of the chances, it was the Hornets who fell behind, but the breakthrough wasn't made until the second half when Chris Wood was on hand to turn home James Tarkowski's knockdown from a Claret's corner. Later on in the half, Burnley doubled their lead from the penalty spot after VAR yet again was involved, indicating that a penalty should have been given to the Clarets after Jose Holebas was judged to have fouled Ashley Barnes in the area, and Barnes himself stepped up and converted from 12 yards. Minutes later, Burnley rounded off the performance with a third goal by James Tarkowski, unmarked from a Burnley free kick. His initial shot was saved, the rebound fell kindly back to him, and he made no mistake in scoring the second time around to give Burnley their first away win of the season. Yet another poor result for Watford. You might have thought they would have kicked on their season following them getting their first win a couple of weeks ago, but that obviously hasn't happened here. And you might have to wonder whether a second managerial change at this club may be a possibility going forward, especially with December holding a lot of tough fixtures for the Hornets to contend with. As for Burnley, great to finally get their first away win of the season, that should be, but for the Burnley side, it's about being consistent and putting together a kind of run that shows progression, especially given how open the Premier League is this season. Up next for Watford, it's an interesting tie ahead against fellow strugglers Southampton, whilst Burnley host Crystal Palace on Saturday. Our next game saw Norwich end their 7-game winless run to heap more pressure onto Everton and Marco Silva as the Canaries ran out 2-0 winners over the Toffees at Goodison Park. 10 minutes after the interval, Norwich took the lead through Todd Cantwell, who slid the ball beyond Jordan Pickford following Timu Puki's through ball. Norwich withstood some heavy Everton pressure from there until the Canaries managed to put the game to bed by adding a second goal very late on when Dennis Sebeni's smart finish was met by joy and cheers from the away supporters and a loud cluster of boos from the home fans who were obviously not happy at being undone by, at the time, bottom of the table Norwich. Oh dear, oh dear. If he wasn't worried about his job security before now, he has to be right now. Marco Silva has seen his side lose to bottom of the table Norwich in a game where the Toffees were at home. Norwich had been on a 7-game winless run and hadn't even scored an away goal since the opening weekend of the season. And of course, it's the Canaries that took all 3 points here. And to make matters worse, Leicester, Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester United and Arsenal are all fixtures that await Everton in December. It's going to be a very long and tough month, you feel, for Everton and their supporters. And you'd imagine that the writing is probably already on the wall for Marco Silva, and it's only a matter of time before he gets the boot. Everton travel to high-flying Leicester on Sunday in their next game. As for Norwich, great to finally rediscover their taste for winning. They were clinical in taking their chances, and on top of that, they also record a clean sheet. Not a bad day at the office at all for them. Next week, they face Arsenal, another club under pressure, and it may be a game that they may just fancy their chances of taking something from. We will wait and see on that. Our penultimate game this week saw Alexander Lacazette rescue a very late point for Arsenal as Southampton came very close to upsetting the Gunners further following a 2-2 draw at the Emirates. 8 minutes were on the clock when Southampton took the lead. A quick free kick played through Danny Ings and the England striker fired home past Leno. The lead lasted 10 minutes though as Arsenal went on to equalise. Kieran Tierney's cross picked out Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, whose shot deflected into the path of Alexander Lacazette, who struck home to get the Gunners back on level terms. The game remained deadlocked until the 70th minute when Southampton were awarded a penalty after Tierney dragged back Danny Ings in the penalty area. James Ward-Prowse stepped up and initially burnt Leno's save from the spot kick. However, the rebound fell kindly towards the England midfielder and he managed to score at the second time of asking. Late drama soon followed as Gabriel Martinelli's cross wasn't dealt with by Saints goalkeeper Alex McCarthy, and the cross found Alexander Lacazette, who stabbed the ball home to rescue a point for Unai Emery and for Arsenal. Not the result that Arsenal would have wanted, quite clearly, and even more quite clearly, the fans were not happy with the players and the manager, and it's now even turning to the board and the people behind the scenes, especially given what's happened not too far away from Arsenal with what's happened at Tottenham this week in them getting rid of their manager and replacing him with Jose Mourinho. There are some serious problems at Arsenal right now, and a draw against seemingly relegation candidates isn't helping matters. Imagine what the atmosphere will be like next week if they don't manage to win against Norwich. As for Southampton, a better performance, a more spirited one, but they'll be kicking themselves. They just couldn't manage to hold out a little while longer to get the victory. But it might be a performance that may just keep Ralph Hasenhüttl in the job for a little while longer. The Saints host fellow strugglers Watford in Saturday's evening fixture. And finally, in Monday night's encounter, Aston Villa came out on top with a 2-0 victory over Newcastle at Villa Park thanks to 2 first-half goals in quick succession. 32 minutes were on the clock when Conor Hourihane powered home a well-worked free kick, and mere minutes later, Hourihane turned from goalscorer to provider, delivering a dangerous cross that Anwar Ghazi turned home from close range. Both goalkeepers were called into action at various points in the game thereafter, both making fine stops, but in the end, Villa saw the game out, kept a clean sheet, and more importantly, took all 3 points. Quite clearly, a great win for Villa here, and this result means that they add to their home form that is growing and building up slightly over the past few weeks. They've proven they can be a tough opposition for anyone. It's just about trying to put together a consistent enough run so that the threat of relegation doesn't become an issue later down the line. As for Newcastle, inconsistency is an issue for them too. Not a good day for them at all, and they'll just want to move on from this in all honesty. Both sides will be facing the 2 Manchester clubs when they are next in action, with Aston Villa travelling away to Manchester United next Sunday, whilst Newcastle will be hosting Manchester City on Saturday in the lunchtime kickoff. And that wraps up this Premier League review show for Game 13 of the 2019-2020 Premier League season. Guys, if you have any thoughts, comments or opinions of your own on any of this round's results or major talking points, then I'd love to read them in the comment section below. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things will be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch, the Football Observer. This has been another Premier League review show, and I will see and speak with you all again soon in another video.